Hey everyone, welcome back to the lookout. It's lookout time, 5 o'clock. Today's a pretty active day on the park fire after a week of things really not doing a lot. Today the fire woke up and is super active. So can do a little special coverage of what's happened today. Is a pretty hectic day up there, it sounds like. They pulled all the resources off of the part of the fire that's most active. Sounds like some engines got impacted by fire, and one of them was damaged. They have accountability for all the people who are out there in those divisions, and they moved everyone out of the area, out to mineral on the part that's blowing up. So we're going to look a little at the geography of where it's blowing up. We're going to look at some webcams. We're going to look at the weather outlook and kind of just the potential. Around 3 o'clock it really started going. Got some notes here. And a lot of chatter on the radio for a while, just everyone trying to figure out, make sure they had everyone. There's a lot of people out here on this fire. There's a ton of people in this area. And there's a lot of people at a drop point, and then the drop point got pretty much started to become impacted by the fire. Sounds like maybe the dozer might have gotten burned over, but the operator was okay. So quite a bit going on. But they have accountability on people. And generally on lookout, we don't, if there's an accident or a burn over or anything like that, we don't, a serious accident, we won't discuss it much until it's kind of released by the incident. So, pretty hectic out there today, it sounds like. So I'm just going to play a couple images. If you're not in the area, if you're in the area anywhere within 150 miles of the fire, you just go outside, you probably see this happening. But this is kind of a wide angle view starting about 2 p.m. from Bald Mountain, so a long ways away. And extreme amount of action here in Mill Creek. They zoomed out a little at the end there, but this is what it's doing right now. And it's insane volcanic eruption. That's not Mount Lassen erupting. Here's a view from Stover Mountain. So looking down from Chester, as we've talked about a lot now. Not super concerned about this fire actually threatening Chester or Lake Almanor, because of all this salvage logging that's taken place and the Dixie fire scar having greatly reduced fuels. And then here's kind of current view from Colby Mountain Lookout. So I spent the day yesterday or the afternoon kind of down below this in Deer Creek, and I'll show some pictures from that. And so the fire has kind of moved back over the hill into Deer Creek. Deer Creek was kind of tied up. This fire blow up today has kind of impacted Deer Creek again, so we'll look at that on the map. So, sorry here. Just to kind of orient ourselves real quick, here's Highway 32 coming up from Chico, and here's kind of where the fire was yesterday. This is the K-Line Bridge, and here's 32, and it goes down to the Red Bridge, the hiking trail to Deer Creek Falls. And the strategy, they ended up going direct on this over the last 4 days when the fire was kind of laying down. I reported on here I didn't think they were going to do that, but I didn't have very good intel, and they did. They went direct. As of yesterday afternoon and this morning, and even the most current infrared, they'd held this. Sorry, I got a scanner and one here. So as of this afternoon, it hadn't jumped here down in Lower Deer Creek, but this spot here, the fire ran up out of Deer Creek a couple days ago, 3 days ago, and it spotted here into the Mill Creek Canyon, and that spot is one of the things that came alive today. And then also what has come alive today is the fire that was mid-slope, or kind of up and down the steep part of the canyon. That blew up today and ran up canyon, so we've got downstream of here is Black Rock, Here's the bottom of the canyon. Minerals up at the top here. And the fire was established here. And today it ran, this is drop point 24, where they had a bunch of resources and where it got hit by fire. And so that's kind of your basic geography. You got Division Tehama uniform and Division Tehama whiskey. And both of those got pretty hectic. Whiskey pulled all their resources, so everything that was kind of assigned to the fire between here and going up towards Mill Creek, this thing blew up, and they pulled all the resources out to Mineral to regroup and kind of figure out a new strategy. So, real quick, we'll look at some weather here. Earlier today, the relative humidity here in Mill Creek Canyon was 18%, which is critically dry. And temps down here lower were 95. And then the wind gusts were, winds have kind of mellowed out, but you can see there's still this kind of strong southwest flow, and that's what's pushing that column. And this kind of is the past 3 hours, showing the column kind of blowing up this afternoon. And this is the infrared showing that kind of extreme heat of the fire. And you can see that it gets kind of wide here. It's not just like, so it's not just burning up out of Mill Creek, but it's burning to the east as well. And I'll come back and do weather stuff after we kind of jump into the mapping, the other mapping. If we can. There we go. Okay. So here's the red line is where the fire was this morning. And so as we've been talking about, the fire's been kind of slowly moving up, and it's been really creeping for days now up the canyon, not very quickly moving. So like for reference, this is the 31st. So 6 days ago, the fire was here. And on the first, it was here. So today it's moved as much in one burning period. It's well beyond this red now, but this is where it was this morning or last night at midnight. So it's moved a couple miles, but it just barely moved through there in the last few days. So what happened today, kind of overnight, the fire was established down in the bottom of this draw here in kind of perfect alignment with the terrain. And then also this was the spot fire. So we had this run here that ran out of Deer Creek a few days ago, spotted over into Mill Creek and became established. And this also blew up today. So around noon, the fire blew up out of here. They've been holding it with dozer line and helicopter drops and a lot of effort at the top of the ridge. And so as of this morning, they were successful basically at holding it here on the ridge as it moved up canyon. So they had a lot of resources out there today to kind of try to keep doing that. And today the difference was that it was drier and there were winds and the atmosphere was unstable. And so the fire blew out of here in a really big, dramatic way. And so now it has spotted all over the place out here in these clear cuts. There's just dozens of spot fires. And this mapping is as of 2 hours ago. So the fire is kind of well beyond that now. And about an hour ago, it was pushing here into drop point 24. So they've prepped this road here as a line, and that likely isn't going to hold because no one's there right now to fight it. The fires, as you can see, like there's nothing they're going to do out in front of this thing right now. So what's that mean for Mineral? Means that the fire, it's likely the fire is going to run this slope. Likely it's going to be over this road. They've got dozer line out this road. As we've talked about a lot, mid-slope lines are not great for holding fire. They're great holding fire under, they're never great holding a fire. But they're possible places to hold a fire under kind of less than critical conditions. But right now we've got critical conditions. So The strategy so far, there's been a ton of work done prepping this corridor over the last week with the idea that the box for the fire, because they didn't think they can fight the fire directly in the steep, gnarly canyon of Mill Creek, the box they've been building is to go around this road all the way up to Hole in the Ground. So that strategy is kind of out the window now that it's across this line. So fire's going to run up in here, and this is kind of the headwaters of the South Fork of Battle Creek, or Antelope Creek. It's going to do its thing until the weather cooperates. Now, we talked a couple days ago about this kind of tension between direct attack and indirect attack, and then the fire kind of doesn't care if what your tactic is. The fire has got its own timing. So the fire's now kind of pushed up and out, and if the weather cooled down tomorrow, maybe they would pick it up a direct attack out here in all these clear cuts. But the weather's not going to cool down tomorrow. So we'll look at the weather and we'll talk about where this thing might be headed. And let's throw on here real quick our Dixie fire. Blue's the Dixie fire. Black lines on here are dozer lines. And so this spot fire that was backing down into Mill Creek today is spread out to here, and now this is 2 hours ago. Now they were saying that the fire has crossed the L line, so the L line is kind of the ridgetop road, and as we were showing, this is kind of where they had held it before. So from Deer Creek, we're talking about Deer Creek now. We're done with Mill Creek for a minute. This had been held, and it's still, I think, holding through today's winds. But now this part of kind of Cement Creek and Onion Butte and everything is threatened by the fire coming up and over the top instead. Now, the fire coming over the top and burning downhill in here isn't the end of the world for, like, it might not kill all the trees, but it's going to be hard to control if it gets over this break and slope, because this is really, this head of Cement Creek here is really steep. Like, if we draw kind of a profile across that, kind of from, let's just say from here to here. Let's just go all the way over to Deer Creek. It's pretty steep in there. Like, that slope down to there is like 30 to 40%. It's steeper on this side. It's like 50 to 60% coming up Onion Butte, and then dropping down into Deer Creek is all 40% or greater, which is, it's just steep ground. That's hard ground to operate on, and it's hard ground to take dozers down. And what we talked about yesterday too is just that this head of Cement Creek and Onion Butte, as you look from up on top of the Mill Creek Plateau, it's kind of a perfect setup. I thought that the fire was likely going to come up out of here, but if this fire comes up and drops down into here, it'll be interesting to see how far this fire moves today. If this fire doesn't move too far up on the top and they can get on it, they might get dozers around. They've got a lot of dozer line out here already. So if the fire doesn't get really past here today, that's good news, because if it gets down in here, it's just going to be a slog. So what's that mean? What's any of it mean? So far, okay, here's the good news so far, is that the fire, as it's burning in Deer and Mill Creek, or at least in Mill Creek, is burning largely in kind of scrubby, like oak scrub, live oak, kind of thickets, not a lot of conifers. And this all burned 25 years ago. This is not like old growth, irreplaceable. stuff that's burning so far. As we get farther up the canyon here in Mill Creek into what's called Big Bend, down in here, this is incredible, giant old forest dug for huge old trees, never been logged, and some of this has never been logged. And so that's where, if it cooks hard through here in the next few days and kills a lot of those trees, that's the real kind of deep loss, the irreplaceable old growth kind of. This is just one of those places on the landscape that when you look at the whole landscape, there's not a lot of landscape left that's got the old growth like Mill Creek. So I'm hopeful that, even if the fire kind of runs up through this scrub, I'm hopeful that the best possible outcome is that it rains and the fire goes out, but that's probably not going to happen. Second best outcome would be that the fire backs down into the deep dark parts of Mill Creek and doesn't devastate the old growth. So it's going to be unfolding here for a while. As you can see, just like when we've got conditions like this, it's just pull out and regroup, figure out a new strategy. Nothing that people are going to do on the ground with dozers, or you're not going to get aircraft in underneath the column. So right now there's aircraft that are up right now, and they're working this flank right here, trying to keep this portion of the fire from getting in and undoing all the, if this fire gets in here and rolls out and becomes well established in here, in a lot of ways it's undoing all this hard work they did to keep the fire out of here. And if the fire gets established in Deer Creek, then they've got to figure out how they're going to wrap it before it gets to the bottom of Deer Creek and wants to go up the other side. If it goes up the other side here, which probably isn't going to happen anytime soon, then it could threaten Butte Meadows again eventually. So it's a tough place to fight fire, and the weather has finally changed. So what I'm making of the huge plumes on Colby, Stover, and Morgan is just that this all blew up today. This red line is where the fire was this morning. This area here is everything that's burned kind of since about 10 a.m. And it's out beyond here now. This is 2-hour-old imagery. And it's also burning actively in a spot that we got established here. Larry Adams says, why didn't you put maximum effort on this fire when it first started? Why does it sound like, just like Dixie Fire, why does it sound like the way I don't have faith in you guys anymore? Well, there was a huge amount of effort put into stopping this fire when it first got started. I was out there in Upper Park watching it, and they had 7 air tankers and 2 helicopters and as many engines as you could fit on the road, and dozers, and you can't catch them all, Larry Adams. So sounds like you never had any faith in us in the first place, but yep. Goddamn environmentalists told us we couldn't cut any trees down, and now we got 400,000 acres of, oh wait, this is all grass and brush down here. There's no trees to log. You can't blame the environmentalists for not logging all the buck brush and star thistle down here. Sorry. Yep. Yeah, blame someone else. Blame whoever you want, man. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, weather forecast. Somewhere in here, we've got, look at all these tabs. Too many tabs. There we go. That's not the weather forecast. This is the, okay. So these weather pages here are, yep, the greens and the gov. Okay. All right. So these weather forecasts are built for prescribed fire, and so they're coded to kind of help people who aren't colorblind figure out if there's danger. And so yeah, danger, bad. This is at 4,000 feet. It's supposed to be 93 today, 94 tomorrow, 94 the next day. It's supposed to be like 90 through the whole week. The minimum RH, this is the bad part. Today is 12, tomorrow is even lower. Like single digit RH is just like bad news. Nothing good's going to happen on a fire when the RH is in the single digits. Really, if the RH is below 20, you could have critical fire. We've had dry days but no wind, and so what's happening now is just even a little sustained wind, that and the unstable atmosphere, like a fire this big needs to breathe. And so when you can have some breeze, but if it's still stable, fire can't really breathe. This fire is breathing really fine now. So that's the bad outlook here. It's just that like next 3 days we've got high temps and critical RH and bad recovery, right? So this is the really big deal, is that max RH here for the next 4 days never gets above 30%, and that means that the fire's not gonna they're not gonna get a great opportunity at night to put the fire out, because at night it's only dropping to 70 degrees at 4,000 feet. So altogether that gives us this kind of 4 days of really bad weather forecast, coupled with south and west winds with gusts to 15 and steady winds of 2 to 6. So it's not great, because you've got kind of a steady flow coming from the southwest to give the fire some ventilation, gusts, and then you've also got this ventilation rate. This is for those of us who are like, when we're planning a prescribed burn, we need good ventilation, because otherwise the smoke settles in and people complain about the smoke. So this kind of these green numbers, I don't know what this I don't really know what the units are. Just that green means you're well ventilated. And then your mixing heights, if those are really low, it means there's an inversion that caps the fire. So having inversions or having mixing heights that are thousands of feet above the fire means that the column can go up and churn and burn. So really not a great forecast for the next few days. The kind of big picture forecast is it's supposed to be windy there tomorrow. High risk for dry, gusty winds following abundant lightning in the east, which we haven't really, it's not an issue for us right now on this fire. No precip, breezy. They're just basically saying it's August. Nothing is going on that's going to keep us from having our typical kind of bad fire weather. All right, so all that just means that it's not a great sitch. And here we got Kilo 9 is it's a lead plane, and basically they're flying around because there's like a 737 working the fire right now, and so this person's job is to lead the tanker in. And so if you look at where that person's flying over and over, it kind of gives you an idea of where the tankers are dropping, the big tankers. And so as we talked about, this Lassen trail is also the L line here at Onion Summit, and they're painting along the L line to try to keep the fire from moving down into that headwaters of Cement Creek. So basically out in here. And what we've talked about a lot here is, pre-treating with retardant is kind of a Hail Mary. It's like when you have a fire like this one, like look at all the spots that this fire is throwing out. Like it's dry, temperatures are hot, fuels are super dry, humidity super dry, there's winds, the fire's making big runs, and it's throwing spots. And so you can go and you could paint this whole corridor, 400 yards wide with pink retardant. And if the fire makes a run out of here and spots out there, there's nothing it's doing for you. So retardant's best to cool down the active edge of a fire, or it can be effective to pre-treat. But in timber, with conditions like this, it's kind of a Hail Mary. And big problem with just maximizing the amount of retardant on the ground is that we've got like 2 of the most endangered Chinook salmon runs in the world, or at least on the West Coast, in Mill Creek and Deer Creek. And retardants, it's toxic to aquatic species and kills fish. So obviously we don't want the whole world to burn up, and we don't want to not use retardant where it's going to be effective, but we also just going and flying a whole bunch of retardant out here and pre-treating an area where it's really unlikely to hold. It's not great. Not great. All right, so I want to show some imagery. Someone says this on and off thing. Oh, Wildfire 371, who bought a hat. Thanks, man. Should be expected until snow or season-ending weather event. And that's the problem, is that just like Dixie, the parallels between Dixie and this fire, there's some really incredible parallels, right? Like Dixie laid down for a week at the end of July, and then it came to life on the 2nd of August, and on the 3rd or 4th it burned down Greenville. And this fire laid down for the last week of July, and now on the 5th it's come to life and it's blowing up. And so we're in that. We know Dixie gave us that preview of hey, once something like this is going on, it's going to burn until the weather changes. Because what this fire has in common with Dixie is Dixie ran through, Dixie here in blue, ran through 1 million acres. And if you look at the fire history before Dixie, you see a lot of fire history in the Feather River. You see a lot of fire history in the Klamath Mountains. You don't see very much fire history at all on the Dixie fire. It burned through the Chips fire and the Story fire, the Feather River. But when it got up into Butte Meadows or Humbug Summit, Humboldt Road, Chester, Drakesbad, all this stuff, there's no fire history in there for the last 80 years. And so this fire just had this kind of uninterrupted patch of forest. So you look at the same thing here. It's there's no fire history in the last 80 years, really, between the Cub fire and the Onion fire that burned out of here in 2008 and frickin' anywhere north, really, except Dixie. This red stuff here. There's some fires in the park. I think that's just Lassen Park. Where is that? Yeah. So this fire's got a ton of fuel out ahead of it, and the weather to gobble. So eventually it might hit Dixie out here, and when it does, I think that we'll control it. As I've said over and over, I don't think that this fire, even though it looks scary and it's dramatic and shades of Dixie all over again, I don't think you need to worry about it in Chester. Of course, I've said before too, I'm not here to second guess the evacuation orders, and if one comes in, don't tell them that Zeke said it was okay. But when I look at this map of salvage logging around Chester in the Dixie burn, I would feel pretty good being in Chester, being surrounded with tens of thousands of acres of almost bare dirt, that this fire's not going to come burn you up in Chester or Almanor West. And even down towards Prattville, you got a ton of salvage logging. And these areas out here that got burned by Dixie, there's just a ton of reduced fuels. I don't think it's going to hit Dixie today. Someone said it might hit Dixie today. I don't think so. It's got this whole side of the fire is cold. Down through Highway 32. All right. Okay. I'm going to show some pictures and take a breath here. Okay, so we already looked at the gnarly smoke blowing up cameras. Okay, this is yesterday. I went out yesterday with good friend of mine, Dan Kelleher, and we didn't see hardly any fire at all. But we saw this. This is burning kind of a couple miles off of Highway 32, interior, what we'd call interior, and it's just one spot where like one big down log. The heat from it is kind of like allowing the fire to kind of keep perpetuating in this kind of thicket. This was kind of like right after dark, and that's just to say that like a fire like what we're saying today, it'll make a big gobbling run, and then it'll like flicker around in the woods for days. And a lot of this, when we get to talk about the good fire effects we get, it's this, little patches randomly in the woods that behave a lot like a prescribed burn. This is from Windy Cut yesterday. So Windy Cut's one of my favorite spots, and you've heard about it on this channel. It's as you drop down into Deer Creek on Highway 32, there's the K line, and then there's this big J-shaped turn, and then there's some craggy rocks here that fall on the road when there's snow, and then you come down and there's a National Forest sign. And Windy Cut is this cool little promontory on top of this ridge where you can pull off, and it's the best place to pee in Tehama County. So I've stopped there thousands of times, probably, or at least hundreds. Anyway, so from Windy Cut yesterday, we were looking at this section of K-line where that we talked about that hasn't moved. And so this is what it looked like from Windy Cut right before the sun went down. There was, a little bit of smoke going on here, but this part of the fire hasn't spread for several days. And as we come around here, this is Onion Butte up here. And so when we're talking about the fire coming up over the top today, potentially, and getting in this steep country, it could get established in the top here after they fought so hard to keep it out of here. And here's Kelleher stroking his mustache and thinking deep thoughts. This guy's a pure wizard and burn boss extraordinaire, hell of a guy. Dan set up the sprinkler system at Ron Ward's that helped save Ron's place, and potentially had other big benefits for Cohasset. So that's my co-pilot yesterday. What else we got here? Photos. So we hung out and watched it, and photogenic dude. So then we headed up. This is another view from Windy Cut. This area burned in 2007. All these trees that are dead here in Deer Creek are from fir beetles. And so there's a huge amount of dead standing. So in some ways, if a fire backs into here, it's not the end of the world. Deer Creek is not going to be destroyed by a fire. This fire, there will be portions of Deer Creek that burn hot if this fire gets established in there, but it's not the end of the world for the forest. And burning now into these areas that burned 15 years ago is better than keeping fire out of it for the next 30 and having all this dead material fall down and then burn. If we have a fire that moves through Deer Creek right now and all this dead material, it's going to knock over a lot of these snags, and then the next fire can clean them up. But if these snags stand for another 20 years and all fall down and create insane fuel loading, and then we have a fire in there, it's going to kill all these other trees. So this area is due for a fire, and it won't be the end of the world if Deer Creek burns, in my opinion. But you can really see all the dead trees out there in Deer Creek. This is looking kind of east of Deer Creek Canyon. And this is what it's been like there for several days. It's been really stable, really still, and that smoke lays in, it shades things, keeps the humidity kind of trapped, and fires just kind of don't do much. So we drove out of there and headed kind of down towards the divide between Deer and Mill Creek. And I think, I posted an image of this big green kind of area of the burn and said, hey, 80% of the area that's burned is like brush and grass. And I think people imagine that the entire landscape is fried and there was nowhere for the animals to go, and you've got 400,000 acres of devastation, and a lot of it looks like this. where portions of it burned hot, other portions didn't. This is looking down into the kind of the headwaters of. This is a tributary to Deer Creek. And on top of the ridge, there's these fuel breaks, and some places it didn't even burn. There's like what used to be called squaw carpet, and I think it's now like mountain holly is the name for it. Some of that didn't burn at all. Right, so this is inside your 400,000 acre burn. So when you see it on the map and it's all red, it's like, well, and where did the deer go and everything like that? There's places in here that we've talked about having low severity that actually look like this, where the fire didn't even burn. It burned patchy. And even in here, you can see that like there's areas out in here that like they didn't burn. And then a lot of the wildlife that lives out there has burrows that can survive the fire, and then they come out and there's still stuff for them to eat. It's not just there's places in this fire that are really moonscaped, and there's some large areas that are really moonscaped. But a lot of it burned. A lot of those big contiguous areas of burn are grass. They will sprout as soon as there's some rain. And then there are places like this where there's just this real kind of natural patchiness to the burn. Dan and I were talking as we drove through some of these areas. It's like if I was burning this area as a prescribed burn boss, I would not be happy with the result, because my job as a burn boss is to get the fire hot enough to kill all these little baby cedars so they don't turn into a future thicket. So real mixed severity in portions of this fire that burned under milder conditions. So as we've seen, like now we're going to get this big pulse, and we're going to have a bunch of fire in the South Fork of Antelope Creek that burns hot, and that's the story of this particular weather epic. Guaranteed that this fire is going to push hard and push up a ton of smoke, and then the high pressure is going to rebuild and the fire is going to lay down again. And so you don't really get these low severity impacts necessarily without some high severity loss. This is looking out into tributaries to Deer Creek. Not all killed. But also on the upper slopes, the fire burns hotter and it has more momentum. And then you have patches like this that do get really roasted. But to kind of just revisit real quick our severity mapping. These areas that we were just talking about, where you saw the pictures of the kind of the underburn. All this blue, so this is Highway 32 coming out of Deer Creek here. And here's the turnoff to go to Butte Meadows down here. All the black is the dozer line. This is the H-line road. And the H-line, the landowners out here over the past, 25 years, they've anticipated this kind of event happening. And as such, they kind of did a patchwork of clear cuts and what we call shaded fuel break, all the way down the H-line to Cohasset. So here's Cohasset Road, Ponderosa Way, and all the way up this H-line had heavy thinning. And then as it's worked in with their clear cutting plans, they've clear cut patches of it. But they anticipated that a fire would come up out of Deer Creek, and that this would be a place that they could try to stop it. Now, what the problem with this particular plan is just that if you look at where the fire was on the morning of like the 26th, it was on both sides of it was in Deer Creek and Chico Creek. So it was too late to stop it from coming out of Deer Creek into Chico Creek, or coming out of Chico Creek into Deer Creek. But what is interesting about this fire is that when it comes to like the 27th, so the fire started on the 24th, and by the 27th it was like all the way, almost done running north. But if you look at the severity map and that line from the 27th, you see that after the 27th, the fire kind of laid down. And it's like, well, why was that? The weather changed, basically. And so the fire had this kind of big push of southerly winds, and it really nuked like crazy. And then on the 27th, it kind of laid down. And during that time that it laid down, which it basically has laid down, and from then until now, we haven't had huge runs on the fire since then, really. In that time, they were able to come and do this big kind of tactical firing operation where they lit, if you look at like the 28th, they had lit, like all this area here had been lit. So the fire was already out here. They brought fire down here, and then over the next couple of days, they brought fire all the way down to here. Butte Meadows turnoff, right? So those pictures I show of the kind of low severity, nice open stands, those are in fuel break areas that a lot of this blue out here looks like that. So someone says probably costs twice as much to fight the fire than to treat the forest. And someone asks, how much does it cost to do prescribed burning? All right. Okay. Okay. Now I got to remember to turn the map back on. Okay. Jackie says, what is being done to protect mineral? Well, they've had a bunch of time to prepare for mineral. Let's I'll talk a little about mineral, and then I'm going to talk back. We're going to talk back a little again about direct versus indirect tactics. I need like the intermission music and the little little screen. Just put up something that I can do some jumping jacks or something. All right. Okay, mineral. Let's talk about mineral. I don't think I have any pictures of mineral, but here's mineral proper. It's in the bottom of a big valley. Battle Creek Meadows. There's been a bunch of thinning done on the private land around here. I don't know exactly where. I'll try to pull that up at some point. So let's just look at like ownership and stuff like that. All right, so green is Forest Service. And what that means for practical purposes in this area is that nothing much has been done to manage this forest here for a really long time. Like maybe a little bit of thinning here and there, but Forest Service for the most part has just had pretty much no capacity to manage the scale of land they own. So here's someone says, why do you have a red line going through the Esri globe? So glad you asked. This is Esri. I don't like Esri, but Ryan's telling me to share my screen. All right. Well, here's Esri. They make mapping software, and I've been using it my whole career, and this is what I think about it. This is why I use Google Earth. Someone's asking about suppression avoidance on the CAL FIRE maps. I'm going to put my map back on, and So yeah, Forest Service. Here's mineral. We'll go north up for y'all who like your maps that way. Forest Service all around mineral. Sick forest. There's a bunch of work being done right now. It's called like the West Lassen Headwaters Project. Huge NEPA process to do a ton of fuel treatment. And so NEPA involves spending 5 or 10 years surveying everything that would be damaged by logging, and then while you're doing your NEPA, this happens, and this is the reality, right? Is that we spent we're tied up in NEPA trying to do little piecemeal projects that probably wouldn't stop this anyway, and then this is going to burn all that project area that people are diligently doing their sensitive species and ARC surveys and everything to make sure that we don't like run over a rare plant. And so when you see green here, this is like NEPA land. We shouldn't even call it Forest Service, because Forest Service, like when you say Forest Service, it implies that like there's some sort of action, like someone, you think of service, people who work in service, like have a service job, they do something for you, right? They make you a milkshake or a latte or something. You give them a tip. But no one's giving the Forest Service any tips because they're not serving anything. They're serving up sick forests to fire, and then the fire is devastating them. So while I'm on that topic, we talk about building capacity in forest management, and the Forest Service has like negative capacity. They take people who are bright and young and idealistic and have a lot of energy, and then they like make them write NEPA for like 5 or 10 years, and then the big NEPA monster comes and gobbles up your project, and then you end up like writing more NEPA for like salvage logging that'll never happen. And so yeah, Forest Service, they have the opposite of capacity. They're just sucking energy out of the equation. Someone says, did Ukraine start the fire? No, but I think the Ukrainian Forest Service is like getting a lot more done than the Lassen National Forest at this point. Anyway, green, bad, flammable, sick forests. So if you live in mineral, I know it's not a happy thing, but you've got like some of the world's worst fuel loading in the world between you and the fire, because that's the way it is in California. That's why the Dixie fire burned 1 million acres. These guys aren't off the hook either. Private timberlands, they're actually doing a lot of work, but it isn't necessarily making minerals safer today. So yeah, if you're going to make a comment over there about active forest management, like this is pretty freaking active, this forest management that's happening here. And then our fire doesn't seem to be distinguishing very well today between active forest management and inactive forest management. It's just it's eating whatever it wants. All right. Anyway, so yeah, mineral. This fire is going to run to the top of this mountain today, likely, and then it'll likely back down this side slower than it went up the hill, and then with any luck at all, it won't haul ass down the mountain and burn mineral, and it's going to pack a ton of smoke in. So that is kind of what happens with our smoke monster here, is all this smoke that's being held up today by the fire. Like when the sun goes down, that's going to come down, and you're going to have like AQI of like 900 in mineral, and that's going to help suppress the fire. It's going to help hold down the humidity. You're going to have kind of like nuclear winter up there, which is good. Nuclear winter is not good for much, but it is good for suppressing fire behavior. And so, yeah, fire's going to run up here on Turner Mountain. It's going to mellow out some a little overnight. Hopefully, smoke's going to pack in. Tomorrow, the smoke will peel out the fire will run again. But what we saw in Dixie was we'd have big runs, and the fire would basically run to the top of every mountain it had access to. So today, you know, maybe it'll run to the top of Onion Summit. It might run up onto Turner Mountain. And then once fire runs to the top of the hill, it's kind of like, oh, what do I do now? Like, I can't run up any more hills. So, you know, what we saw in Dixie, fire runs up the hill, lays down, backs down for a while. You might get some good fire effects out of it. And then you get another big event later, and it runs up another hill. So by the end of today or next couple days, the fire will probably be at the top of the hill here. And then it'll back. And so backing fire is good. You know, if you look at a lot of our landscapes, you'll see that like upper south-facing slopes have like less trees on them. So let's turn off the sick land layer here. And so like up here, Turner Mountain, south-facing, upper slope. You got brush fields here. You got brush fields over here. Like those are a relic of, like you can even almost see like a previous fire run that ran up here, you know, maybe 100 years ago or more. And so you expect that south-facing upper slopes are going to get hit hard by fire when there's fires. And then the north slopes are kind of more shady, and the toe of the north slopes generally fires back down in there. They don't generally like race down into there. And so these north-facing slopes here around Mill Creek and everything else, generally they don't get fried as much. So that's what the Mill Creek resort has going for it, is that it is it's tucked in a little. What it doesn't have going for it is that it's oriented where the southerly winds can kind of will be pushing it up the canyon. Will salvage logging take place? Salvage logging will take place on the private lands. So someone asked a question about on the map suppression avoidance. So that's a little cryptic. Sometimes that's an old village site. Sometimes it's rare plant population. Maybe it's a burial site. Maybe it's a modern, like maybe it's an old, like a grave from the pioneer days. It just means that they don't want bulldozers to go through whatever happens to be right there. And it's almost always based on, you know, rare plant or culturally significant spot. Like native people don't want to just throw on a map that like this is where my grandmother's buried, but so they're careful about the language. But oftentimes spots like this, there's just something significant about that where they don't want the bulldozer to like romp through an old village or something. That's the main thing. Ron says the problem with Forest Service has nothing to do with California. It's the wages. They don't pay a living wage, and they leave once they get experience. Yeah, that's part of it. But the other part of it is that they're broken as an agency, and the reason people leave is also got to do with feeling useless and jaded. And no offense to my friends who work for the Forest Service. I know that I had fun work. I loved working for the Forest Service. And that if you work for the Forest Service, you can't take the problems of the Forest Service personally, or you'll go crazy because there's so many of them. Thanks for loving the photos. You know, the Lookout donors to Lookout help me buy a nice camera, and so when I ask you for money, it's so I can buy lenses for my camera and stuff like that. All right. Hey, no, just if you don't like what someone's saying over here, don't tell them maybe you should learn to Google. Like, just no abuse in the chat. If you don't like someone, I think you can hide them. Or call them in real life. Talk to them. But I don't even want to travel through a blue state. Why am I still in this corrupt country? Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Joseph McGruber. All right. I see. That's why I don't look at the comments, because then I just get mad and say rude things. All right, let's go back. I think, trying to find a rhythm where like you guys hanging out while I do my thing, because if I wasn't talking to y'all, I'd be doing my thing. So my thing is to check out the cams. Then they move them and just try to see like, well, can we find a view of it moving into Deer Creek? So I look at it from Bald Mountain. So you still don't see it really kind of coming strong over the ridge into Deer Creek. This is looking from the east up towards Deer Creek. All right. I checked the wildland fire hot list. Yeah, when things are really kind of running and gunning, there's just not a lot of great intel coming in, because so you have to kind of just intuit things like based on like what these tankers are doing. So here's a CAL FIRE tanker that came in from Chico, and here's the lead plane, and they're kind of doing an orbit, so they're coming in and they're dropping down, and the lead plane's giving them an idea where they want them to drop, and then they're going to go around and drop. So when you look at where they drop, you get a kind of an idea of what's going on. So I want to talk a little about direct versus indirect attack. And I'm listening to the scanner, the radio lead plane, so might get a little distracted. Another thing you see here is if you look at the heli tankers, you can look at kind of like where these guys are scouting out things. But some of these heli tankers, you can see like where they've been flying. So for a while today, the heli tankers, there's a pond up here by Lionsville, and the heli tankers for a long time today were hitting hard right here at the top of the ridge, because they didn't want it to get back around where they'd already fought it. But now you can see that they're dropping. The edge of the fire is well established into here. So here's Chester Airport. They're loading tankers out of Chester Airport, and but back here to this heli tanker, you can see that like they're no longer fighting on the edge of the rim; they're fighting it up on the edge of the creek. So if we look over here, turn back on our perimeter. So they're dropping out in here now with those heli tankers. There's just so many spots. And so this looks like it kind of hung up on the road. And so maybe they're using the heli tankers to try to get these spots so they can hold it. It's hard to tell. This is a couple hours old now. The heli tankers, they generally drop like one shot and go back. The S2s can drop more, but often on stuff like this, they drop the full load. So here's your lead plane. I don't know if the lead plane's leading these tankers in. The lead plane's at 6,000 feet. It says the tanker's at 6,000 feet also. This terrain down here is 5,600. Yeah, so it looks like they're kind of painting out ahead of the fire here on the rim. So we talked about how the fire basically is, as of like 3 o'clock, the fire was kind of pushing here up towards the L line and Onion Summit, and then we'd heard that it had crossed. Okay. So someone says that there's a bunch of air tankers coming in from somewhere else. You know, I try to give the air attack people the benefit of the doubt. They really are some really skilled people, but oftentimes when things are, you know, really volatile like today, they're doing what they can. They're looking for the opportunity where they can actually do something and maybe be effective, because they know they're not going to get anything done at the head. Okay, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about direct versus indirect attack. And this is in no way kind of like, I don't want this to get to a spot where it's like armchair quarterbacking and saying they should have done this, they should have done that, because things unfold the way they do. But let's just turn on our roads here and our fire lines. All right, so here's dozer line that's been prepped. So all this indirect line that they've put in, all this black, is kind of a contingency. They're planning ahead. Once they got this weather window about a week ago, they started going direct on the fire on the edge here. So if you look at like where the fire was on like the 28th, that's the white line. Like they fired off this road here, Plum Creek Road or something. So you can see that like this white line here, it hasn't moved like so for over a week. This line here, where you don't see the white line on the edge, that means it hasn't moved. So like this is all growing in the last like week, and they've gone direct here and they've held a lot of it. So if you look like maybe at the 30th, look at the first, like none of this area up here has spread since like for 4 days. And then down here around Yellow Jacket there was a spot and it burned in. But they've held a lot of what they went direct on. So from like Middle Ridge back to Highway 36, basically, they took a really kind of aggressive direct attack, and they were successful. They held the fire in here. And so I mentioned maybe a week ago that I was talking to a friend who was a hotshot, who was kind of informed on the strategy, and that he was pressuring. His thought at the time was they had prepped this road all the way through here, and he thought at that point that they should start firing out in here, because he didn't think that they would be successful with all this initial attack or direct attack. And so he said, hey, if we go out here and we start putting fire on the ground while the weather's good, potentially we can save a lot of this forest here. It's still going to burn, but it might look more like what happened on Highway 32. They had a lot of resources available. Oftentimes indirect happens because there's not enough resources available because of other large fires, everything else. But right now California is actually really slow for fire season, right? We got this one huge fire and almost nothing else going anywhere. So you've got, what, 5,000 firefighters on this? That wouldn't happen if there was like a 2020 lightning complex going on and a couple million acres aflame somewhere else. So they've had a ton of resources. They've gone direct. They've been successful. And pretty much up through today, all the way from here back around, was secured by direct attack. Through difficult terrain. You know, we've been watching this for a week, and we talked about how, hey, this is really difficult terrain. It's sketchy to put people down in these holes with bad visibility. At some point, the lid's going to come off the pot. Things are going to blow up. It's easy to get people hurt. So huge amount of work has been done and successful. So now that the fire is pushed out into here, it's kind of, the question is like, well, what are they going to keep the footprint at here? Is the fire going to burn all the way out to here? And if that happens, then that idea that a week ago we could have started doing kind of prescribed fire style lighting in anticipation that that was going to happen. That's that trade-off, you know, like, and hindsight's 2020, and they still might get an opportunity to go direct in here and pick up some of that. I mean, the other option could have happened is they could have started firing this 3 days ago and had a lot of fire on the ground, and then had this wind event come and have something you lit over here run up and head into mineral, and then it's on the person that lit that fire. So there's always that tension. It's easier to reconstruct later than it is to kind of make sense of on the ground. And as long as they're having good success here with their direct attack, there, you know, is a good incentive for them to keep pushing forward with that strategy. The limitation of direct attack is just that you get into terrain like this where it's not possible, and then like this fire here, even though there was aggressive direct attack on this flank, it was too late in some ways because this fire had already boiled up out of here and spotted into the next watershed. So where they're at right now with fire in multiple watersheds in difficult terrain with 4 days of bad weather coming is just, there's no great options for them. But you can't keep going on direct attack forever you can keep going on direct attack forever. It doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily end out in a better position at the end. The other thing we talked about is just that one of the reasons that direct attack is CAL FIRE's preferred option is CAL FIRE works for the private timber companies. CAL FIRE's entire mission is to protect private timberlands and private lands in general. And whereas the Forest Service, their job is to... What is their job? Put out fires now. Their job is to manage our national forests, our public trust resources. So the Forest Service, they own the land. If they decide they want to light a backfire or do a tactical firing operation and get ahead of the fire, they've got more leeway because they own the land. CAL FIRE doesn't own any land for the most part, except some little experimental forests. So CAL FIRE reports to Red Emerson, and Red Emerson owns 2 million acres, and he gets what he wants. If the Forest Service decides they're going to do I'll tell you, if the Forest Service was running the show and a week ago they decided they were going to burn this whole 20,000 acres with their drones because they didn't think they could hold direct attack, there'd be phones ringing right away in Washington, D.C., telling the Forest Service to put the effing fire out. Right? And that happens. And that's one of the problems with unified command. Say, this fire is under unified command. It's like, well, maybe it is, but as long as private timberlands threatened, like, CAL FIRE is going to kind of do what they want to fulfill their mission. All right. Anyway, direct attack, indirect attack. I think the interesting thing later is to come back and reconstruct all this and look at how it unfolded. We don't know what's going to happen. And good odds that all this work they did saved 15,000 acres of timberland, which is jobs and habitat and deer hunting and all the other things that these people are managing for. But to the question of will the clear cuts help or hinder fire suppression, it depends on the weather. Like if the fire is not spotting a mile, not doing this, then yes, all these clear cuts, you can get dozers out in there, you can put in line. And so if you look at like under mild weather in this patchwork of thinning and clear cuts and roads everywhere, like they were able to accomplish something that they wouldn't have been able to accomplish if this was all unmanaged thick forest, right? So the problem with that managed versus unmanaged working is that on days like today, there's things about clear cuts that really increase the spread of the fire. Namely, they're dry. They often have a lot of grass in them, and spot fires become established quickly and run quickly. So it's like having a little grassy meadows all over the place, and we know that fire runs through grass. So that's one of the biggest problems with this type of arrangement is just that when we have big plume-dominated fires driven by long-range spotting, this patchwork of clear cuts, it spots from one to the next, and it's even though we can get in there easier, there's roads, dozer line, etc., it's hard to hold the fire. Talking to dozer operators, one of the problems with clear cuts is you go hauling ass through there in your dozer to catch a spot fire and you hit stumps, and that's no fun at all for the guy driving a dozer as fast as he can through the cloud of smoke and dust. So yeah, like on this other side, a lot of these clear cuts, like it helped the firefighting to have that access, but the fire here wasn't looking like this. All right, so northern end of the fire is looking great as far as I've heard, all the way around. So like, if we look, kind of the best tool we have for that is to turn off all this blood red here. If we turn on the heat satellites, yellow is like, I got way too much stuff going on here. So the heat satellites aren't showing any heat anywhere on the fire really, except here in Mill Creek, Little and Antelope Creek, and Deer Creek. Oh, man. All right. So, what else we got to talk about? I think that's it. I am curious where this, if we can get a view of where the fire is in Deer Creek. See what the airplanes are doing. This map here, got too much going on it too, but let's see. What's going on here, people? Why is it so yellow? Oh man, so these bright colors here are like kind of showing you where the real broad scale heat is, and they're showing it like way up in Mill Creek, like cooking up here and turning around. Like that might be some of the column, but it looks like on this this is like, you know, view from space. It's not great stuff. Like it's nothing to plan tactics on, but it's just showing that heat in the column. But it's showing that it's really nuking the south side of Turner Mountain is what it looks like. And the heat satellites, the other ones are lagging way behind. All right, air show. Someone wants to see the air show. There we go. All right, so over here we got a bunch of helitankers, and this is what a helitanker looks like up here. So they got a big snorkel and they can drop a ton of water. So they're running laps here, like little ponies. And out here you got a 737 from Australia. And you got a C-130 from the National Guard. MAFs are C-130s here. You got a BAE 146. These come out of Chico. So you got all kinds of stuff happening here, and you got an air attack flying around circles trying to figure out where they're going to go, and you got a lead plane over here that's flying around circles, and anyway, someone has to pay for it. We all pay for it. Sometimes it works. I think, you know, the problem we see with Fire Monster here is that it's too late, people. It's too late to put this thing out. And so yeah, you can do a lot when it's looking like this, and you're like out there with your little airplanes that are like this big on the picture, it's too late. Like we should have spent $100,000 a drop, and it's like we should have spent that $100,000 on thinning last year. Should have spent that, each airplane out there costing, you know, $1 million a day. We should have spent that money on building piles and burning them, like in November after it snowed. So all this stuff, it's just, we're going to spend like a $500 million on this fire by the time it's over, and that's a crazy amount of money. So it's, and you see that New South Wales, it's like global firefighting. It's the business of firefighting is this global thing. You got big companies like Perimeter Solutions that have a monopoly on retardant. We know the retardant kills fish, but we haven't, like, no one's been able to compete with these mega monopoly chemical people. Follow the money. Someone said no one. 371 says no one's safe till the snow flies. I'd say I want to come back to Chester. Like, this is a moonscape out here, and it kills me to see it when I drive through. But that moonscape is gonna keep this fire out of Chester, and that's a good thing. So what are we looking at? Just talking like distances and stuff. Like, say this fire blows up down here and runs up, burns Turner Mountain and everything else. Dixie will protect us. Saying it over and over, and I hope it's true. And like every time I'll say it, I'll say, like, if someone tells you to evacuate, don't tell them Zeke said not to. But But if the sheriff's watching this and wants to talk to me about it, I'd be happy to go for a ride and just go out and look at it. And if people got like, if you're involved in like deciding whether or not there's gonna be evacuations in the Elmore Basin, like, I'd love to talk to you. And if you if you think I'm spreading dangerous untruths or something, or you feel like there's a reason that there should be evacuation, I'd be happy to share the message, and I'd be happy to go out and look at it and communicate that and retract anything I'm saying about Chester being safe. But for now, I think Chester's safe, people. Local fire agencies are having work crews leave fire combustible debris on the ground. Yeah, you drive Highway 70 from Portola to Quincy, and the Caltrans stand along the highway there, and there's all this red slash everywhere, right where like someone's car fire could start it. And it's like, oh, that's not fuel reduction. If you want to thin and do fuel reduction, you got to take care of the red slash, because the red slash is highly flammable. No more worrying about it coming down 32 to Chico. I really don't think so. But the caveat here is that this fire is going to burn for a long time, and it could get established in Deer Creek. I mean, it's going to be established on the top here. Could get down Deer Creek, eventually could burn back up the other side here towards Butte Meadows, and then north winds in September could blow it back down this side of Highway 32. It's definitely not, it's not out of the question that could happen. I would have said, like before Dixie, that was really far out, but like, let me just pull up here's a progression map of let's see if we can load this. This is Dixie fire progression. And Dixie just did really bizarre things. So like I said, it kind of started off, and then it kind of laid down for a while. Like here, it didn't move much for like for a while. This is the end of July. And then this is the beginning of August. This is it burning around Chester, burning Greenville. And we got a big west wind event, and it blasted off to the east. But look at like Indian Valley here. Like over the course of like 2 weeks, right? The fire burns all the way around Indian Valley, burns down to Genesee, and then it like ends up almost in frickin' Hurlong. And see, they made that map before the fire ended. The fire kept going all the way over here, and then it ran out all the way to the desert. So when you look at that, like, okay, this took like 2 weeks to go around Indian Valley. As 371 says, it's like, who knows, man? Right, this is a little, where's an actual map of it when it was done? Look at something here real quick. All right, in the meantime, I want to plug the Lookout website. This is, the YouTube channel is kind of just part of what we do, but we've got a website, and it's an archive. We've got excerpts from each day's video, or most of them. And up here, you can check out all this previous stuff we've done. If you want to learn about the mosquito fire, you can, we had a lot of coverage of that one. If you want to learn about the Red River Lumber Company around Westwood, there's all kinds of different categories here. Forest management history. These are different things we've covered where we talk about how forest management affects what we're seeing on fires. So check out the website. We're not real good right now about updating the website. I've been putting all my energy into YouTube, but the website's basically our archive, and the Dixie fire was what got us started, and we covered the heck out of Dixie. Like, we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of posts. We have day by day posts of the Dixie fire for a long, long time. And someone said, you should write a book on Dixie. I said, I already did. It's called thelookout.org. So if you want to study into this stuff, there's a ton of resources on this stuff. And the most important thing is, if you click here and subscribe, it'll take you to PayPal, and you can look at sorry, I don't want to share all that. Sorry. Go on PayPal and you can become a subscriber to the Lookout, and then we get a little $5 or $10 a month from you, and that helps me do this whole thing. All right. Think about how large and how to orient fuel treatments to stop the park fire when it's doing its big runs. All right. So there's a lot of talk. I see some chatter over here about fuel treatments, and there's a lot of politics around timber harvest that kind of glom onto fuel treatments, and fuel treatments end up getting treated by environmentalists as logging. And there's a suspicion that the Forest Service isn't doing anything for the right reason. And I say a lot of mean things about the Forest Service, but they've got some really bright people planning things for them. But unfortunately, the Forest Service kind of burned the bridges with environmentalists so badly in the 80s. You know, in the 70s and 80s, the Forest Service was totally out of control and cut down almost all the old growth on the West Coast on Forest Service land. And that's just a fact. Like, if you go out in the woods on National Forest, if there's a road there, they built that road to haul away all the big trees. And so they really messed up. And so environmentalists and a lot of people who, that label gets applied broadly to a lot of people. But a lot of people who cared about forests and old growth and other things didn't like the fact that the Forest Service had abused the forest so badly. And they got shut down. And now they're in planning jail. Where was I going with that? But in my opinion, fuel treatment like this snake fuel break running down through Butte Meadows, those during this fire were very effective. If we look at where this fire got controlled, like all down here along Highway 32, it got controlled in these ridgetop fuel breaks. They didn't even have to go right to the road. They just put dozer lines and roads through these fuel breaks, and that red line is where they stopped this fire. And so all that work that Sierra Pacific Industries has done to piece together a fuel break all the way down Highway 32 on their ownership, like, that saved the day. And so the problem with all this stuff with fuels treatment is that it doesn't hold up during a run like we're having today. Like, nothing, like, once the fire gets in alignment and has the weather and the fuels, it's going to spot over a fuel break like this. But by putting these fuel breaks all over the place on their landscape, Sierra Pacific Industries bought firefighters a lot of options. They bought them places they could work, and that really helped steer this outcome of them getting these firing operations done in this weather window that saved this forest. That meant that SPI didn't lose, like, their whole ownership in here doesn't look like that. Without these thinnings along Highway 32 that got done, it's very, very, very likely that the fire would have got into Butte Creek and ran and been still a problem out there, still threatening Sterling City and Butte Meadows and everything else. So fuel treatment's it's complicated and it's not pretty. You know, like these little snakes down the ridge, like they don't look pretty on Google Earth. But like when you look at the photos that I showed, like this is one of those fuel breaks. It's pretty. there's big trees there still, and there's going to be big trees there in the future. My question is like, well, why not make the whole forest look like this? Why confine it to this little linear strip and clear cut everything else? And I think that a lot of people still think that like, okay, this is overdone. Like it's going to be too sunny, it's going to be too dry, it's going to change the microclimate. There's got to be kind of an in between, because in the past the forests were a lot more open and fires could run all over the place. So fuel treatment, landscape scale thinning, like yeah, there's a lot of logging, but there's way too many trees out here. Like this whole landscape's got like gazillion times more trees than are sustainable, especially with climate change and like a drier climate that higher demand for water by the trees that are there. That's why a lot of these trees were dead before the fire even happened. Too many trees on the landscape. So if someone says, oh man, fuel breaks are just an excuse for logging, it's like, some people think that we shouldn't expect logging to pay for itself. That if we care about the forest, that we should just pay for it out of pocket, and that as soon as you start expecting to pay for forest treatment with log revenue, that it just bastardizes, that the whole process gets kind of corrupted, and that it's just going to end out with us cutting down more trees. And that's based on people's, there's a lot of people who've held on to the same stories about the way the world is for their entire lives. And yeah, maybe the Forest Service's commercial timber sale program is deeply flawed and needs to go away. But we're not going to like sustain forests. We're not going to have trees left if we don't cut a lot of trees down or kill them with prescribed fire. Steve Joe says, do you have a list of sources for open data, especially for the open layers used like dozer lines and ownership? The ownership I'm using is from CalTopo. The dozer lines I create from the raw data, and unless you know how to do GIS stuff, it's not easy to figure out. This fire is unique in that they're actually uploading their fire lines to a server that's public, where lately most people aren't doing that, which is a bummer because people should be able to look up where the dozer lines are. All right. How effective are shaded fuel breaks? Like we said, it's all about the weather. Just see if there's any new intel here. All right, new perimeter. Did we get a new perimeter? I can't tell. Yeah, new perimeter. So I wish I had the last one. See, a lot of the spot fires we're looking at out in here have filled in now. All right, and then this on this side, it's okay. Yeah, so here's what we had this morning. people. All right, so this perimeter in white is 3 o'clock, and you can see that the fire was. Let's turn off this stuff. So at 3 o'clock, the fire was on opposite sides of the Mill Creek Canyon, and now, as of 5:30, fires burn on both sides of the canyon, and so they said it had slopped over the L line, but I don't know really where they're talking about then. Doesn't look like it has yet, according to this. I'm not sure if there's an L line on the other side too or what. In the past, these were different. Oh, never mind. Right, so this is bonkers, and this is bad news, just the way that it's marching up the canyon in such a dramatic way. Like, bad news for if it keeps going with this intensity and this widespread. Like, what starts to happen is the heat from both sides preheats the other side of the canyon, and it just really is what leads to this kind of nuke bomb fire behavior. So let's hope that doesn't nuke out this unique landscape. It's just so hard for me not to be angry about, like we talked about a while ago, like we look at say like sorry, I was trying to find some old imagery here. We talked a lot about, in the past, we talked about how there was a lot of thinning done on the private lands out here. And there's been opportunity there's just, it's hard to look at this landscape as someone who's really into prescribed fire, because with coordination, like all the thinning that got done here and everything, there have been opportunities where we could have put fire into here. The only tool we have to manage these steep, remote areas is prescribed fire, and there just hasn't been the political will, and there hasn't been the kind of radical perception of need to do this, right? The only tools we have to manage these steep landscapes, we're not going to log 60% slopes in Mill Creek Canyon. We're not going to thin in here, but we could backfire down into here under conditions that would kill some of the trees, but like reduce fuels, right? And maybe we could have done that. Maybe we could save it. If this whole thing just goes up in smoke because we've been too afraid to take those risks that are necessary to like save our forest, it's hard to watch the last bits of kind of old growth that are left that didn't get logged burning up because we don't have the will to take some risks and work at scale, right? The only thing that, like, if we look at this other side over here that burned in 2008, it wasn't destroyed by fire. It's a good thing for this stand that it got burned in 2008. Lightning started fires on top of here and they backed down in, and the trees that survived that, they might survive another fire. The only reason that happened, the only reason they weren't able to put that fire out is because there were too many fires burning elsewhere in 2008, and they didn't have the resources. If we'd had lightning all around here in 2008, and there weren't like 1,000 other fires going on, they would have put these out, and this landscape would be even sicker than it is now, because it wouldn't have gotten fire 15 years ago. But luckily, in my opinion, we didn't have the resources, and this all got to burn during a lightning fire, and it's in pretty good shape now. Like, this is what it looked like in 2000, 5. And this is what it looks like now. You can't really tell barely that it burned 15 years ago. Anyway, it's a bummer watching this stuff burn up, and it's even more of a bummer just to feel like we're not going to get ahead of it. Like, we know what we need to do. We've known what we need to do for 30 years of letting more fires burn, using prescribed fire at a larger scale, and still we're paralyzed. We're not getting things done. And then in the meantime, big old what do they call it? Big Ernie, eating our lunch. Big Ernie's angry. Paul Hanley's asking about the huge increase in fire activity. There's kind of a setup today for it. You know, like this red line is where the fire was last night. And if we look at where the fire was on the 2nd. So this is the fire on the 2nd, and it was kind of, you know, it's what we would call overslung, where the fire is kind of, it's falling down on itself. But it's not like, this fire can't really run up on itself. And then so that was the 2nd. That's the 3rd. So it moved quite a bit. And then yesterday it was still kind of overslung. And then this morning, it started the day with this alignment, we would call it. There was a lot of heat. So this is last night's infrared, and it's showing where there's intense heat. And so yesterday afternoon it made a decent run, and that set it up. Basically this was at yesterday at 8 p.m. I was here. So then it kind of stewed overnight and didn't do a lot, and then this morning that this area here was just all primed. So as soon as we got kind of up canyon winds today, and the temperatures came up, it was really dry, and we got this nuclear run, right? And then once you get this huge run going, at some point fires kind of stop being driven by fuels. It sounds a little weird, but they become driven by heat, right? And so of course you have to have fuels to have the heat, but once the fire generates this kind of critical level of local heat, then it becomes, the physics of it are different. It's not just kind of like fire burning from stick to stick. It's this wall of heat that's preheating everything, and then just what we call sometimes kind of like area ignition, where just whole areas start going up at once because there's just such an amazing amount of convective heat. So that's kind of today's setup, is just a lot of fire on the ground in the bad places. If we look at let me see if I can find something here. Here's a weather station on Highway 36 right below Mineral. And let's do a graph. So today's temperature, yesterday's was 90. It wasn't that much hotter. But today's humidity, it cratered right down to the teens. Like yesterday at noon, it was 26. So it hadn't been that low since the 2nd of August, right? 3 days. And today, look at this too. We got this, our mean wind speed. It peaked at like 4. But that, you know, we just haven't had much wind at all. Like here, the mean wind speed was 2. So it's these subtle differences. And then today we had, there's been some gusts, but today we had gusts to 12 or more. Yesterday we had gusts, but we didn't have the critical humidity. One thing that's interesting about this chart here, the solar radiation, is that when you look back on periods in a fire, it can give you an idea of how much smoke there was, because this is like the battery on the battery charger on the weather station. So if you look at times when like it really packs in with smoke, oftentimes you'll see that like, hey, there's on the 3rd there's a lot of smoke laying in there. Anyway, so today what's going on up there? Air temperature up below mineral, 95 degrees. Fuel moistures here are down 5.2. That's low. When you get below 6 on the fuel moisture, weird things start to happen. And then our humidity here just down to like 15. Let's look at yesterday. So yesterday the fuel stick got to 5.8. On the 2nd it was really smoky. And fuel still got dry. But the humidity at like peak burning period was like, it came up like in the afternoon. So yeah, on the 2nd the monsoonal moisture came in. We went out in the afternoon into Deer Creek, right? And you see that the humidity like kind of spiked from like 16 right before the monsoon got here to like 40 by 8 p.m. And if your humidity is 40%, like your fine fuels aren't burning very well. Your grasses and like even like your dry pine needles. On the 3rd, still had that monsoon parked here, right? On the 3rd, the RH never got very dry at all. So humidity is a huge part of why today blew up, right? Got back in the teens. It hadn't been that way. That monsoonal moisture kind of spiked here, and then it kind of lingered. So you can see like the humidity recovery was pretty high at night. All right, handling the house. All right, what's going on, people? I think I'm gonna jump off. Save some mojo for later. It's gonna be going. The company I work for has 4 or 5 hand crews on this fire, and so when I heard it was blowing up, I called around and checked in with the folks out there, and it's squirrely. There's a reason that they pulled everyone off this division to mineral. There's a reason for that. Is because they knew this was going to happen, right? And it was good they got out when they did. That drop point where everyone was, kind of as things blew up, like it's totally inside the fire now. And if you look at where they were and where they have to go to get out of there, there's nothing but super thick forest all the way out to mineral. Right, so they couldn't get out this way. So they're out, and fire's pushing up Turner Mountain, and we'll see what happens. Someone with passion for land management, purpose of fire mitigation, keeping wildland healthy, make a career of it. Yes. Here's what I think is, you got all these people who have way more money than they know what to do with. The Bezoses and the Musks and everyone. And the problem we've got with CEQA, environmental laws, is if you want to use public money to do forest management, cut brush, prescribe fire, even burn piles, you have to participate in the CEQA process, California Environmental Quality Act. And there's categorical exemptions and whatever negative declarations. There's like all these games that people play to get around CEQA, and that's what a lot of what foresters do, is play the CEQA game. But it's this huge hurdle that's a pain in the ass. And so if you go to the Fire Safe Council and say, like, hey, I want some money to burn piles, they're like, okay, well, we got to send someone out to survey for pond lilies or whatever. It's money for consultants, and it's turned into this huge industry, and it's lame. So, but hey, if you show up, if you call me tomorrow and say, hey, I've got $1 million and I want to thin 500 acres and prescribe burn, I can send you a crew tomorrow, and we can do it. We don't have to do anything. We can start our chainsaws and our chippers, and we can get to work, and we can use your money, and we can thin the forest. So the people that have the big bankroll need to step up. They don't need to give the money to the Fire Safe Council. They don't need to give the money to someone else that's got to go through all the bureaucracy. If you have money and you want to work on your land and get prescribed burn, like, call me. I can help you spend your money. Like, there's plenty of people that will cut your brush for money, and we won't have to do any environmental work because we're not asking the state for a handout. So the whole Fire Safe Council approach of state gives grants to the Fire Safe Council, they do all the paperwork, they hire the forester, they do all that. Like, it's not working. Like, we've been doing that for 25 years, and we're still burning up towns. We're still burning up Cohasset. Like, Fire Safe Council spent ton of money, and the work they did was very impactful, but it's not the ticket. So we got to diversify our sources of income. So if you know anyone who wants to, like, spend $100 million on, like, doing a project to save a bunch of land, there's projects out there. Problem is that we can't do it on the Forest Service land because you got to do NEPA for them, which is like CEQA but federal. Anyway. Okay. Yep. NEPA death layer. I like that. I think we're going to start just calling this this green layer the NEPA layer of death. Anyway, there you go. Fun stuff, kids. Catch y'all later. I might do something in the morning if things are crazy, but otherwise, see you tomorrow night or on Twitter or something. Check out the Lookout. Send us some donations. We appreciate it.